attempt to the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. All right. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
What do we have for participants on here?
I think Sam called in, and Sheila. Looks like we got maybe one more. No, that's it.
Is Sheila here for something on the agenda, or is she just...
First item of new business.
If anybody has... We have attendees, quite a few, right? You get to open up.
No, attendees are just Sheila and possibly Sam.
Oh, so it's just two. Okay, they are opening up. I thought it was 20-something. All right. All right. So, and unless Sheila has something she wants to say in the public comment, we're just going to move forward and begin. I'm trying to go back, so we'll go with the packet. So the school reopening plan will be the first thing up anyways.
Correct.
Okay. So let's bring Sheila in, please.
Hi, Dr. Muir.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me. I don't know, is it possible for me to share my screen at all, Jessica? I was going to share just a few slides with our select board members regarding the school reopening plan. I can certainly just speak to it if the option to share my presentation isn't available.
So I just changed the settings so it says that all panelists should be able to share their screen. So let me know if you are able to.
All right, let me try that.
You may have to redefine her as a panelist versus an attendee.
Good point. I'll do that now.
There you go.
Okay.
All
You
right.
should definitely be able to.
Okay.
There we go.
Great. Let me see if I can find my presentation. Oh.
You're braver than I am, Sheila.
I know. Every time I try this, I can find a new way to mess it up. So, let's see. I had it all open and ready as always, but that of course is not the case now that here we go. All right. So I put together a few select slides from our school committee and family presentations. I'll try to be as brief as I can, but every time I try to be brief, there's more to share. So stop me if I'm giving you too much detail. I just thought that I'm trying to make the rounds to all of the select board members to give them this overview of where we are in our planning and what's happening, so that you have an opportunity to ask questions as well as to to be informed about what our plan is. These are our planning goals. We really started with the top priority of keeping everybody safe and healthy. And the secondary priority was providing as much in-person instruction as we could for as many students as possible. And then, of course, also providing a purely remote option for students or families who did not feel comfortable coming back to school given our current health crisis. I always want to reinforce that as hard as we've tried to make this plan as solid as possible, as you know, I'm sure there are so many uncertainties right now with everything that's going on that this is subject to change. And we're going to try to minimize the changes that are necessary, and hopefully there won't be many, but along the way there could be some reasons that we need to make some modifications. And as soon as we are aware of that information, we'll try to make it share it with all of our constituents. What we initially started was the Department of Education, as you may know, asked all school districts to analyze their spaces to see how many, what the capacity was if we were to put students and staff in our buildings with 3-foot physical distancing. And many of the medical experts at the Department of Education was consulting with really felt very strongly that 3-foot physical distancing was safe for children in schools. After, doing that analysis and realizing that we could bring all of our students back for in-person instruction with 3-foot physical distancing, and presenting that preliminary plan to the school committee and parents and staff, we really, got feedback that many people in the community, as well as, really our administrative team, felt as though we needed to go back and take a second look and really think about the CDC guidelines, which were 6-foot physical distancing as the safest approach to return to school. And so we went back and analyzed our spaces and our furniture in all of our classrooms again. And we realized that with the 6-foot distancing model, we could not have all of the students back in the district full-time for in-person instruction. So at that point, we had to decide, how do we prioritize our students? Which ones should we bring in for in-person full-time instructions, and which students could we think about a hybrid model? And so we prioritized our youngest learners and our high needs populations for full-time in-person instruction. And in doing so, we went again and analyzed our school spaces once again to figure out, all right, how many students can we fit in each school? What's the size of the furniture? As you know, that's a factor. We've had to get rid of some of our tables that that teachers love for collaboration, and we've really had to revamp a lot of our school spaces in order to make this work. But ultimately, we figured out that we could bring all of our students in grades pre-K through 5 and our in-person and our high needs students back for full-time in-person instruction with 6-foot physical distancing. That is going to require us to reorganize some of our schools, our elementary schools in particular. As you probably know, Ruggles Lane was full prior to this with all the programs and students that we had in Ruggles Lane. Hardwick Elementary was also full, as was Hubbardston Center School. And now with taking our classrooms and spacing students out with 6-foot physical distancing, we're in the range of 12, in some cases 10 students per classroom, 12 students per classroom. In some of our elementary schools, we can get up to 15 students in a classroom. But our typical classroom prior to COVID-19 held 20, 25, and sometimes up to 30 students in it. So in order to get those students spaced apart 6 feet, we needed to free up some room in Ruggles Lane, Hubbardston, and Hardwick. Fortunately, Oakham Center School had a lot of excess space, as did New Braintree Grade School. And so we chose to move the preschool classrooms from, we had one preschool in Ruggles Lane and one in Hardwick. We chose to move those 2 preschool classrooms to Oakham. The Project Create classroom, which is a substantially separate special education classroom that was formerly housed in Ruggles Lane, will move to Oakham for the year. And the New Braintree and Oakham students in grades K and 1 that were formerly housed in the New Braintree Grade School will also move to Oakham for the year. That particular move is, as you may know, we had one principal that was responsible for both the Oakham Center School and the New Braintree Grade School for many years. But because of all of the health and safety protocols that we're putting in place and all of the new routines and all of the new expectations that we're putting in place, I just did not feel as though it was safe to have one school where there was, or 2 schools where there was not a full-time principal. So for the year, because of the health and safety crisis, there won't be any students in New Braintree Grade School. all of those students will be in Oakham Center School, so I can have one principal who's there full-time in that school. And in addition, we need to move the grade 6 students out of the elementary schools and up to the middle school for the year. I keep saying for the year, but what I really mean is till this health and safety crisis is over. Families, of course, we all want this to go away as quickly as possible, and I certainly hope that it's only a year. But I guess none of us really know how long it will last, and so I guess that's just a caveat. Until this is over, we have to reconsider the use of our classroom spaces and make the best of a very difficult situation. So this is an overview of the 2 models, or the 3 models actually, that we're going to use this year. So as I said earlier, if you look at the top left of this screen, pre-K through 5 and our high needs students will be offered the opportunity to come to school for full-time in-person instruction. On the top right, in grades 6 through 12, we'll use a hybrid model where students will be divided into 2 cohorts. We're calling them the blue and gold cohorts, and the students will come to school 2 days a week and learn remotely 3 days each week. I'll share a little bit more detail about what that will look like in a subsequent slide. And then, of course, for all grade levels, we will have a completely remote option. This will be available to any family who chooses not to send their children to school for in-person instruction. We have some families where the children have some medical conditions that make it too risky for the families to send them to school. We also have some families with, maybe some medically compromised family members that just, don't feel that the risk is something they want to take right now. This is just a picture of what a classroom looks like, arranged with 6-foot physical distancing. This is Ruggles Lane. And you can see it not only does it look like there's not many students in here, I think there's 12 in this particular classroom, but also it also is, you can see that this is of course a classroom that's been cleaned out for the summer, but this will be very much like what our classrooms will look like. There won't be any rugs, there won't be any, there'll be not much paper used. There will be all the soft surfaces, things that are difficult to clean and disinfect, like beanbag chairs and those types of things. We just won't be able to use those things this year. So and this is how we're going to staff this, because that was our biggest challenge, trying to figure out how do we take the children, spread them out into twice as many spaces and not hire twice as much staff. So this is our staffing pattern in the elementary schools. It's really what we're calling a paired staffing pattern, where students will be working in 2 adjacent classroom spaces. In some schools, I don't think this will happen in Ruggles Lane, but in some schools they might be working in classroom spaces that are across the hall from each other. And 2 educators will work with that 1 cohort of students. So the example I typically use is a classroom where there are, say, 24 students. Will pre-COVID would be 24 students. We'll take those students, we'll divide them into 2 groups of 12. And the classroom teacher and that paraprofessional will work between those 2 classroom spaces, supporting all of the students. And so the teacher will still be responsible for the education of all 24 students, but 2 educators will share that the teaching and support responsibilities throughout the day. Students will pretty much stay static in those cohort groups. They won't leave the classroom for art, music, physical education. Those teachers, for the most part, will come into the classroom. Physical education classes will, as much as possible, be held outside. But the students, in order to minimize the amount of mixing of students, most of the teachers will come into the students' classroom space rather than the students leaving their classroom space to go to other classes. In 6 through 12, as I said, we're going to use a hybrid model, and again, full remote for those who choose not to come back. There's also what we're planning for at all grade levels is what we're calling an intermittent remote model. We know that there may be some students who become ill with COVID-19 or maybe have some symptoms of COVID-19 and need to stay home for a while until they get a COVID-19 test or until they've quarantined for the appropriate number of days. If those students aren't actually sick, but they're just home awaiting a COVID-19 test, they can engage with us remotely and not lose 14 days of instruction. They'll be able to connect with the remote learning option that we have, just a temporary connection with that, and then when they're ready to come back to school, they can transition back to school for their in-person instruction or hybrid model. This is what a typical student week will look like at the secondary level. This is grades 6 through 12. Monday is going to be all remote for all students. And so in the middle high school, students take 5 classes per day. They'll engage in synchronous learning sessions, so they'll be in classes, live virtual classes in the morning, all of their classes for about 30 to 40 minutes each. Then there'll be a lunch break, and in the afternoon, they will continue to work remotely on their assigned learning activities, and they'll be working primarily independently. There will be some staff that's available to support them if they have questions, but the afternoon on Monday for our educators will be used for common planning time to make sure that there's a lot of consistency with what's happening from classroom to classroom across the school district. And in order to make that transition between remote learning and in-person learning as seamless as possible. Tuesday morning, those students would come to school for in-person instruction. They'll have all of their classes, and about noontime, they'll be released to go home. They'll take their lunch with them on the bus. Won't be able to eat it on the bus, but they'll eat it when they get home. And they'll work remotely in the afternoon. This will allow the teachers to be available to answer questions or support the students who are learning remotely that day. So in the afternoon on Tuesday, for example, teachers will be working with all of the students who are learning remotely on Tuesday. Wednesday, cohort A will work remotely in the morning, and then will be able to connect with their educators during office hours in the afternoon. Cohort B just has the reverse schedule of this. So Wednesday they would be in person. Tuesday they would be in person. Wednesday they would be remote. Thursday they would be in person, and Friday they would be remote. We are proposing. We did a lot of parent surveys along the way, and student surveys and staff surveys to gather information that has informed this plan. And I should say that a much more detailed presentation is available on our website. I tried to just cull some slides that I thought would give you an overview, but there's a great deal more detail on our website and in the plan that we published to the Department of Education on Friday and made available on our website today for the community. But we are proposing a remote learning center for the New Braintree Grade School. As I mentioned earlier, New Braintree Grade School will be vacant of students this year. And one thing that we heard from our families is that a hybrid model for older students can be challenging because some families are working outside of the home. And so to have their children home 3 days a week learning remotely with limited options for childcare is challenging. So this is a proposal that we are putting forward. It would be a place for students to come to just to access their remote learning options. It would be safe and it would be supervised. We wouldn't have teachers there, but we would have adults who could supervise the students and make sure that they're staying safe. This would be staffed by our before and after school program staff. So it's really an extension of our before and after school program. We're still assessing the fees that would be required. This would have to be a financially self-sustaining operation, because our district budget could never support something like this. But it would be available from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily if it's possible to do this. What we've discovered as we've researched this a little bit is that there are no regulations governing this type of a program in the state of Massachusetts. And so it's my understanding that in talking and having our attorney work with the Department of Education and the Department of Early Education and Care at the state level, they're actually working on regulations that would govern something like this. So we're awaiting those regulations, but we do have a fair amount of interest from our parents in our parent survey. I think the last time I checked, there were about 48 families that said they were definitely interested in this, and over 200 who said they weren't sure at this point whether they would have the need to access some of a program like this. So we're excited about this if it's something that ends up being a viable option for us. I won't spend a great deal of time, but as you can imagine, we are developing protocols and protocols on top of protocols. But of course, all students and staff will be required to wear masks. We will have very specific expectations for hand washing. That should say also hand sanitizing. We're installing hand sanitizers everywhere. And students will be sanitizing, and staff will be sanitizing their hand pretty much before and after everything they do. Physical distancing, as I mentioned earlier, students will be assigned seats in their classrooms and will be expected to sit in those seats. That doesn't mean that students are going to be sitting necessarily all day. I know that there were some parents when we did our some open forums for parents that were concerned, does that mean my child is going to be sitting all day? No, it doesn't. But when they are sitting, they will be sitting in assigned seats. And this is really to assist us with contact tracing. If there is a case of COVID-19 in one of our schools, we need to be able to notify students and staff that have been, that could have been exposed to the virus. And so knowing exactly where that child is at all times and who they've been in contact with is essential to make sure that we have the appropriate contact tracing protocols in place. There will be, in many of our schools, one-way hallways. Where we can't have one-way hallways, we have we will have the hallways marked to make sure that students are stay 6 feet apart as they traverse the hallways. Transportation is a big challenge for us this year. I will show you a picture of our bus. A typical 77 passenger bus can only hold, I think it's 23 students. This is something that could have really stopped us from providing in-person instruction. We can't get the kids to school. We can't teach them. It turns out that in working with families, that a lot of families have the option of driving their children to school and are willing to do so. So it turns out, after determining the number of families who will be engaging in purely remote instruction, the number of students who will be coming to school, and the number of parents who are willing to drive their children, we believe that we can get all of the children to school with our typical two-tiered bus routes. One tier bringing students to the middle high school, and a second tier bringing students to the elementary school. So we're happy about that, because it would have changed some of our arrival and dismissal times, as well as provided for a pretty significant increased cost that we're thinking we can avoid at this point. As you can imagine, food distribution at lunchtime is going to look a little different. Students are going to have to pre-order their meals. They won't be walking through that lunch line picking out the options that they want. It will be a pre-ordered meal that will be prepared and then pre-packaged for them. So when they come to the cafeteria or whatever space they're going to be eating in, the meal will be ready. And they will not have, unfortunately, as many options as they've had in the past. Our plant and facilities department will be cleaning and disinfecting. There are very specific protocols that are recommended. All high-touch surfaces will be cleaned in all schools every 2 hours during the day. There will be thorough cleaning every single day of all surfaces. Our ventilation systems are being cleaned and sanitized, as well as filter changes. Those things are things that we always do anyway, but we're making sure that people understand that we have regular processes for that, and we will continue to use those processes. In classrooms and on buses, windows will be open at all times unless it's just not possible to do so because of weather conditions. So increased ventilation, and also we're going to try to hold classes outside as much as possible. The more we can use fresh air and get students out, the better. As I said, there'll be hand sanitizing stations and signage all over the buildings to help remind people about all of our protocols. We are continuing to update our technology. In grades 6 through 12, all students will have one-to-one devices. We have ordered enough Chromebooks for all of our elementary students to also have one-to-one devices, but across the state, across the country, these devices are not necessarily being delivered as quickly as they were promised. And so we're anticipating having the one-to-one devices for all students by November. And our fingers are crossed that that will actually happen. We have not heard otherwise, but we are hearing from many districts that their orders are not being delivered as promised. So we're working on a plan for that. We're also repurposing some older desktop units that we can loan to students who are in the remote learning mode, so that we can get the more mobile devices into our classrooms, where, as you can see, we have so much less space that we really can't utilize those desktops as effectively in the classrooms right now. We have also applied for a grant, as I think you know, to provide hotspots for students who have poor quality or non-existent internet. We have not heard from the Department of Education about that grant, but we're anticipating hearing very, very soon. Our curriculum and instruction, again, this is just an overview, but we're prioritizing our own curriculum, our own educators. We've been using Google Classroom in the spring, and we will continue to use Google Classroom, so that if there is a point at which we need to transition to purely remote learning again because of a spike in COVID-19 or a governor's order, that we will continue to make sure that students and families are well versed in the use of Google Classroom by utilizing that as our platform for delivery of education throughout the school year. And the common planning time, as I mentioned earlier, is something that we've worked into our schedules so that our educational teams across the district can stay very much aligned. And again, this is to increase the ease of transition if we need to go fully remote, and also for those students who may need to go remote for a period of time, the intermittent remote model. Students, if they may need to work with a different educator for a period of time, and all those educators need to be on the same page, pretty much doing the same thing as one another day in and day out. And that common planning time is essential for ensuring that that's happening. I believe that's, a couple more slides. As you can see, a lot of the things that we're doing are new. We're basically reinventing school. And so we wanted to make sure that we had enough time to transition students to school in a way that we have a lot of educators working with a small number of students in the first few days of school, just to ensure that we have adequate time and adequate staffing to teach all the children all of the new expectations and then support them in having those expectations become routine. And so, as you can see, Tuesday, September 8th, we're going to bring just grades K and 5 into our elementary schools. And in the middle high school, we'll bring grades 6, 9, and 11, just cohort A. On Wednesday, September 9th, we're going to add grades 1 and 4 to the elementary schools and bring cohort B of 6, 9, and 11 in. Thursday, we'll add grades 2 and 3 in the elementary schools. And then the 7th, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders for cohort A will come in. And then you can see Friday, September 11th, all the students in the elementary schools will attend, but just 7th, 8th, 10th, and 12th graders for cohort B. Once we get to the following Monday, all students will be in school on their regular schedule, be it hybrid or in person. We also, as you can see, September 8th is not the typical start date for school in the Quabbin Regional School District. We did have to change the school calendar to provide for 10 days of professional learning at the beginning of the school year. This is a mandate from the Department of Education. So originally our students were slated to start school on August 26th with the staff starting on August 24th. Now students will be starting on September 8th, and families have been notified of this change. This will give us 2 full weeks to work with our educators to help them plan for and prepare for this new mode of education that we're embarking on this year. I believe that is the end of my presentation, and I will stop my sharing and take any questions that you may have.
I have no questions. I appreciate it very much, Doctor. Taking the time to present this to the board here. It's a difficult challenge you have in front of you.
Yes, it is. But we're working through it.
Dr. Muir, is there a protocol in place for closing temporarily for X number of cases in the amongst the student population or the staff?
At this point,
how would that work? What does that look like?
At this point, we don't have a specific protocol for that. We're looking at the governors. The governor, as you may know, released some metrics last week that indicates the level of infection in certain communities and recommendations around what schools should do based on whether they're in a white community, yellow or green, I think colors he used, but he's got a color coding system. It turns out that all of our communities currently are very low incidence, and so we're considering that very positive. But the challenge with regional school districts, as you can imagine, is we service a number of communities. We service 5 communities, and we also have students from 26 surrounding communities who school choice to our district. And so using those metrics as the sole measure may not be the most appropriate. And so the Department of Education is planning to come out with some additional recommendations for regional school districts, just like Monty Tech, for example, which which Barry's obviously a member of. They're in a similar situation. They've got multiple towns sending children to their school, and so to look at the metric of just one community. The other factor that's important, I think, for us to think about is that those metrics are based on the number of tests that are given in a community and the number of positives based on the number of tests. So just recently, we looked at New Braintree, for example, and found that there were 19 tests, and one of those was positive. That puts their infection rate, if you will, at over 5%. And it's really just one person. But because of the ratio of tests to positive tests, it kind of looks a little bit skewed. So we want to be sure that when we make those decisions, we're using, we're taking into account all of those factors and making good decisions. So we're working on how to use those metrics to make appropriate decisions. But at this point, we have not landed on a specific decision.
Thank you.
Does the CARES Act provide any financial aid for the school through this, or is it something the town might have to look at? Because, we're allowed to trace money we spent on behalf of COVID. And if the school can, I wonder if the district could come up with a number, and that could go back to the towns, which we could say, we've had a COVID cost, and Jessica would have to make sure too and see if we can do it. But I would think there's a possibility of going through the CARES Act and getting some funding, because you're talking about a lot of cleaning, a lot of Chromebooks, a lot of extra above and beyond the normal curriculum. That we should be able to, pursue finances that way. But I don't know if you guys can do that directly.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I was actually going to ask about that tonight. We did get initially we got $170,000 of CARES Act money. That was allocated to districts through what they call the Title I formula, and we have to share money that comes to our district with Title I with any private school that's within the confines of the district. So some of that money was shared with Eagle Hill School, and some of it was shared with St. Aloysius School, and we may need to share some of it with Stetson School, although we're still working on whether that is required or not. So we ended up with about $150,000 in CARES Act money, and we spent that on the first 3 months of PPE. The Department of Education recommended certain purchases for the first 12 weeks of school, and we ordered all of that PPE, and that pretty much ate up the entire $150,000. In addition to that, every school district is going to be allocated $225 per student, which for us is close to $500,000, which is very helpful. We have not applied for that money because we're still determining exactly how many additional custodians we need. We need, of course, we will need probably at least one additional custodian per school building. We will need some additional staff to man what's called the medical waiting room. And I didn't go into a lot of detail about that in the presentation, but every school has to have a medical waiting room. So any child who has symptoms of COVID-19 is immediately escorted to this medical waiting room, where they need to be, it has to be separate from the nurse's office, where they need to be, of course, supervised until their parent can come and pick them up and take them home, and either for a test or to quarantine. And so we need some staffing for those. We don't have any extra staff. So we are we're hoping to hire certified nursing assistants to man those rooms. Although at this point we've not been tremendously successful in attracting candidates, but we're working on that. So minimally, we're needing to add those staff members. We're also worried, quite frankly, that if we had, for example, a teacher who became ill during the school day and said, "I need to go home," it's very hard for us to attract substitute teachers, just in general, and even more so right now. And so typically in a situation like that, pre-COVID, we might take a couple of cohorts of students and put them in the same room with a teacher. If we couldn't find a substitute teacher, we would say, well, X teacher, can you take, half of Mrs. Jones's class, and Y teacher, can you take the other half of Mrs. Jones's class, just to get through the end of the school day? And that would be fine. We could do that. And we don't do it frequently, but it is sort of an emergency measure. We can't do that anymore because we can only have a maximum of 12 students in any given space. So, we're thinking that we need to at least have one additional paraprofessional or adult in every school building that we can use in an emergency if we have a teacher who becomes ill or some sort of situation where we don't have anyone to supervise a group of kids. Because honestly, every staff member is assigned. There's nobody extra anywhere. So we're really, staffing is a challenge for us, and we're thinking that additional staffing will probably eat up most of that $225 per student. So I have spoken to the town of New Braintree, and I have spoken to the town of Hubbardston about possibly sharing some of their CARES Act money with us if it turns out that the community doesn't have a need for it, rather than send it back or not access it. We would certainly appreciate some help. We have additional technology needs that, although we have allocated money for the additional technology for students, one of the things that we're also worried about is that our elementary students don't have mobile devices. They just have desktop computers right now. And if we were to go completely remote and they couldn't work from inside the school, they can't work from inside the school district currently doing remote learning because none of their desktops are equipped with cameras or microphones. So if they were to work inside the district, we would have to at least buy the microphones and the cameras. And if they were to work from home, they would have to use their own personal devices because we just don't have laptops for them. So that's something that over time we were going to purchase as part of our technology plan, but that's a need that we may have if there's a point at which we need to go purely remote this school year. Last year, while they were doing the remote learning, they were using their own personal devices from their homes, but some of them didn't have them, etc. So we do have a lot of needs, and I know the town has a lot of needs as well. So, but we would love it if you would consider, sort of keep it in the back of your mind. If there are things that if you do think you're going to have some excess CARES Act money, we could certainly use some help with. We don't know how we're going to pay.
I can't imagine we're going to get through the CARES Act money. A lot of us, almost $500,000, I think, we're not going to get any place remotely close to that. But what I was also talking about is we're tracking COVID expenses. Things like the fire department made a lot of purchases for PPE and things. And that's not part of the CARES Act. That's going to get billed separately, tracking our expenses due to this. And I was wondering if the school's been allowed to do something like that, or if there are expenses. We'd have to look into it before you say it, but it may be if the school has an expense they have to pass on to the district that's COVID related, we may be able to put that under strict COVID expense in a separate category. We kept that different on our books at year end to know what we spent on COVID itself outside of the CARES Act money. So that I'm just trying to think of all the avenues to
We did the same. We did the same. We're in our year-end report we submitted. At that point, we hadn't spent very much on COVID-related expenses, but anything that's COVID-related, we are tracking it. We've got a separate account so that we have very, very good records of what we've spent COVID, and again, what's been funded through the grants, but a lot of it hasn't. So we'll do that.
We get a cue. Jessica looks like she wants to say something. Go ahead, Jessica.
Thanks. So I just wanted to let you know that I've been talking with Chief Carbone, and his concern has been the different traffic patterns, specifically at the Ruggles Lane School. So we are using some CARES Act money to allocate more time for a police officer, but he's actually interested in making that his SRO have 5 days a week at the school. So instead of just having a part-time officer come in the morning and then a part-time officer come in the evening for the pick up and drop off times before and after school, having a SRO officer at least at the Ruggles Lane School all day, 5 days a week, which we would hope would be able to help with having that extra adult in the building for whatever needs that you may have throughout the day. The only concern that we have is that CARES Act money, as of right now, is only for expenses through December 30th, which means, any staffing needs, the hardware we can pay attention to because that's a one-time purchase, but for staffing needs we can't really spend outside of that December 30th as of right now. So that's kind of one concern that I have, is that if unfortunately we have to go beyond December 30th, what's the next plan?
We're in the same situation with that money, that $225 per student. I guess it's probably the federal source of that money, but it's the same situation, saying that we can only, and initially we thought it was anything that we could encumber prior to December 31st, but now we're being told that it has to be spent by December 31st. So it's a challenge because these expenses are not going to go away on December 31st.
Quick question. When it comes to the unknown, you were talking about a potential needing a substitute teacher at the last minute, or maybe to help the general public that may be watching this better understand, is what does that person have to have in order to be eligible to assist you if they wanted to? I'm sure they'd have to go through a preliminary background check just to be on an on-call list. But I didn't know if they need other types of education or something to help get you through, say, a half day, or pretty much just watching the room.
No, I mean, we prefer, of course, people with, an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, but that's not a requirement. We do a criminal background check and a sexual offender background check for all of our employees. And so that would be something that would need to happen as well. But there's on our website, there's an employment opportunities tab, and that takes you to a program that we use, which is called School Spring, and people can apply through School Spring, and we conduct interviews, but we are in desperate need of substitute teachers. And so we would love anyone who is interested in that to please apply. And if anyone finds that the School Spring application process, which can be a little daunting if you're not familiar with an online employment application, we're very happy to walk anyone through that process and help them get their credentials into that system. It's not difficult once you've done it once, but first time it can be a little challenging. So anyone here, all they would need to do is just call, and we could walk them through that process.
Thank you very much.
Has the state given you any much leeway in deciding how you do this stuff? Are they really pushing this remote learning? I mean, is it possible to make an option for? I'd be curious how many people would rather just go back to school full-time, regular. If there's a possibility to do that sometime soon, or people are dead against it, or if the governor's not left that as an option.
No, it is an opportunity. In fact, all of our kindergarten, pre-kindergarten through grade 5 students will be coming back to school for full-time in-person learning, as long as they want to. So we have about 17% of our students, give or take. We did a parent survey, and we asked parents to respond to the survey for every child that they had. And for every family we didn't hear from, we've been calling and making contact. I think we've got about 100 more phone calls to make. And so we're narrowing down, getting people to commit. I'm going to send my children into the schools for instruction, or I'm going to have my children learn remotely. So about 70% of our children are coming back for in-person instruction. They're going to come into the schools and they're going to learn just as they have, although it's going to look and feel a little bit different. They're going to be in the schools working with our educators. About 17% on the initial survey were choosing pure remote, and then the remainder were unsure. And so those are the people that we were calling and sort of helping to answer their questions and see, where they needed some support. Some of them wanted to know more about what remote learning would look like and those types of things. So we've been working on that to connect with all of those families. So about 70% of our students will be in our classrooms learning in person. Some of those every other day, just because it's a hybrid, because we can't have them all in at the same time. We just don't have the space in the middle high school.
Hopefully they'll back off that soon. I think still the mortality rate for these school age kids is basically zero. And I understand the concerns that they may bring a virus home to family members, but even in the parental range of these kids, the mortality rate is incredibly low. It's when you get to the grandparents and the seniors. And I think especially people that are trying to work and have young children, for them to do their jobs, they need these kids to go to school. But we discussed this a little bit at our last meeting. I think especially the younger age, these kids, they spend enough time in video games and on tablets and cell phones, garbage as is. The last thing they need to do is take that social aspect of their life away and go back to a computer. So I, for one, the sooner we can get kids back, interacting with other kids, and learning from teachers in person, I think it's monumentally important to the development of all of our children. And I've watched it as my kids grew up. The video games were bad enough, and I wouldn't let them have cell phones until they were 15. I was a real mean guy. But I see kids now 8 years old with their own cell phones and their tablets, and it's spooky. And this really concerns me greatly for that. So, just if my voice is heard at all, the sooner they can get back, I think the better.
Well, we're actually very proud of the fact that we can bring so many students back. For years we were finding the excess school space in our district very challenging, and the fact that we have that excess school space now.
That was good.
Right now, it's good. It may be a temporary good thing, but it is a good thing right now. And many school districts around our surrounding school districts are not able to offer full-time in-person instruction, and we are. So we're very happy about that, and we're really thrilled that our educators will be working in person with our students. And we wish it were all of the students, but it will be the vast majority of students. And I think over time, more and more students will come back for the in-person instruction, and they'll find that it is safe. I mean, they just need to trust that we're going to really keep their children safe. And I think we have to demonstrate that we are going to do that. And I think once we do, more and more people will feel more comfortable bringing their children back into the.
There's certainly been a barrage of media every single day, just trying to say how bad and how horrible it is, and everyone's going to die, and creating this panic and animosity. And look around and trust your eyes. Things aren't as bad as they try to make it out to be. There certainly have been a lot of deaths, especially in people over 70. But to the vast majority of the public, it's really not such a scary thing. So hopefully they can get back, and they can, I hope they're not scared. I would hope the 17% that want to stay home is because they already have somebody staying home anyways, and why not keep the kids home and be safe? I hope it's not because they're literally scared of this.
I think
it's not attacking kids.
In talking to families, there's a variety of reasons that they're choosing remote. It runs the full gamut, to be honest. And I do think there is some fear. There truly is some fear. And And again, I think, we're very, very confident that we will be keeping our children as safe as we possibly can. We wouldn't be bringing children back to school if we did not think we could keep them safe. So we're very confident that we've got very strict protocols in place, and we're going to be very, very vigilant. Ensuring that those protocols are followed by the students and by the staff, and in working together with families to help us. One of the things that we're expecting families to do is to screen their children every morning before they put them on the bus or before they put them in the car to bring them to school, and make sure that they don't have any symptoms. So families have to partner with us and do that work, and we expect that they will, because I think people do realize how important it is for the children to be in the classroom working with the educators directly.
I think they're very well aware of that after this past spring. So hopefully, no more sending kids with 102 fever to school so they can go to work. And that's going to end. As far as the CARES money, we'll have to look into that, and Jessica research more, see what we can do with it, what's usable. Do you gentlemen have anything else about this or any concerns for CARES Act money? Because I don't think there's anything standing out that we need to buy with it right now. So we could possibly sooner than later start moving some money if we can. We got to find out what we can buy with it. But.
Well, I have a couple of things. One is we base some of our CARES Act application money on estimates from third parties. So until we actually buy some of our air cleaning devices and things like that we wanted for meeting rooms, that's an unknown. And we also kind of started that estimate. I only think we wanted 2 or 3 devices, but if we are actually going to start the center, even if it's not for the seniors, but public access for meetings because it's a bigger room, we may need more cleaning devices. I know that the police department is looking to have several of those because it's all cut up offices. And because it doesn't have fresh air intake HVAC, it's all split system. So it's just recycling the air in the office space. That air probably needs to be cleaned. So I think some of the actual costs are unknown. And then the other thing that, and I understand why it probably wasn't said, but I would say that the biggest concern with COVID in the school system, from my perspective, are the adults, all the teachers and the faculty. They're the ones that are getting closer to that age where if you get it, even if you don't die, you could have scars in your lung or heart issues that last the rest of your life. And so if you have one adult that's constantly being impressed by 12 to 15 students every day, and then if it's every other day, 4 days a week, they're going back and forth, ultimately it's a minimum of 24 people they have constant exposure to. And our buildings also don't necessarily have the best ability to bring in fresh air depending on the school and the system. So those are just concerns I think that I'm sure other people know, and I know the school's been probably doing their best to figure this out also. But I just wanted it brought up that we're not talking about that the only risk here is to the kids, and because the kids seem to respond fine, it's not a risk, is untrue. There's a lot more people involved in this process, to include the bus drivers and the monitors that may be a part of that. And then that's even another question, because I know that bus drivers are contracted. So now they kind of fall under a contract relationship with the school district, and they don't have to do exactly what the school tells them to do. They have to do what their boss says. And so there's an intermediary there where we've got to have confidence everybody's going to try to do their best, but the school doesn't necessarily have an automatic way to say, you're doing your job wrong, you're fired, or take a week off, rethink things, bring in another school bus driver. I'm just saying that it is a complicated mess, and I really appreciate the effort they're trying to put to bring it together. But there's a lot of unknowns here, and there hasn't been enough time to actually study the data to know exactly the potential long-term effects from people that even had short symptoms, but for some reason still feel like they got asthma because they just can't quite breathe right. So that was more my thoughts. And when it comes to the CARES Act, there were a handful of things we were trying to use that money for, and we had held off because we hadn't completely knowing exactly where we needed to spend that money. So I don't know if it's even worth, when you were talking about on-call substitute teachers and things like that, we definitely have a population in our towns that are used to this emergency call. Our on-call firefighters and EMTs are kind of used to just being on the phone. So if they're interested, it might be good for them to reach out to this QRSD website and check in on that if they think they can be kind of an on-call to help in those situations.
Absolutely, that would be very helpful. And just with respect to the bus company, we do have a wonderful relationship with our bus vendor, John McCarthy, and our van is our other special education provider, and we have been working with them to make sure that they have all of the necessary protocols in place, and I'm very confident that they will. They've got strict cleaning protocols. They're going to be sanitizing the buses between each bus run. They will be wearing, the drivers will be wearing PPE. We're supplying PPE for our staff if they don't have it, and for students. We have considered putting everything in place that we possibly can to keep not only the students safe, but of course our staff as well.
Dylan, do you have anything to add at this point?
Yeah, is there a way, if anyone is suspicious that they have been exposed or have symptoms, like how quick and easy is it for students or family members of students or staff members to get tests? And how timely and affordable do you think those tests would be for them?
So those, there are free testing sites all over the state of Massachusetts, as I understand it. In fact, we've had some people in our office have to leave the state because they had to take care of elderly family members outside of state for periods of time. And so I know two of them recently came back. One came back last Monday, and she had a test Monday morning and had the results by Monday evening. And the other person was a couple of weeks prior to that, and she had her test on Tuesday and had the results by Thursday. So I do believe that they're turning those tests around. That's just two examples. Thankfully, I have not had to have tested, and none of my family members have. So that's about the extent of my experience with it. But I do know that those free testing sites are available, and that they, at least in these two cases, that folks have had their results returned pretty quickly. Of course, I understand that in some cases, if you don't access one of those free testing sites, that it is a charge on your insurance company will pay for it. But it can, I'm sure there's a copay if you choose not to access one of those free testing sites.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that was very informative. I think the plan you guys have come up with seems, from a couple other schools I've heard, much better. It's better laid out. It's comprehensive. You're getting more students in, the younger the students that need it more. I like the detail you put into it. I think you guys have done a great job with it. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. And at any point, if there are any questions, or if you hear from members of the community with any concerns or questions, please feel free to pass those on, and I'll be happy to attend any future meetings at any point if I can provide additional detail. And I'll probably try to check in with you and a few weeks in and let you know how it's going and what things that we've encountered, and again what kind of progress we're making, and I'll also be able to update you as to the exact percentage of students who are learning in person and those who are learning remotely at that point.
Very
Thank
good.
you much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Personnel committees, wage authorizations for DPW. We've got the contract signed.
Finally, it's all set. Eli is coming next week to pick it up. Finally.
I did go in and sign the forms once I knew the contract had been signed, because as we talked about, we've approved it. We needed their acceptance in writing, so that they should be able to get their pay on schedule and get caught up. Wage authorization, we have for James Jabrilio and Dana Stoddard. Those are both fire department step increases, so I will abstain from that, gentlemen.
I make a motion that we approve the wage authorizations for both James Jabrilio, moving to a FD Class 7 Step 2, and Dana Stoddard, FD Class 2 Step 2.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the wage authorizations for these two. Any further conversation? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Matt Urban, yes.
Dylan Clark, yes.
Greg Will Sullivan will abstain. Election workers, we have Mary Ann, is it Raindew? Is that what we pronounce it?
Riendo?
Rondo.
Okay.
I would say Rondo.
Okay. I'll look for motion for those two appointments for the election workers.
Oh, and there's a third one, I believe, in an amended agenda file in another PDF, a third election worker, I believe. Is that correct, Jessica?
Yes.
Yeah, so Ellen reached out to me today, and there was a third election worker, so I had amended the agenda just to include the third election worker because she is in dire need of election workers, and the next select board meeting won't be until after the election.
Well, I opened the amended one. I guess I did not.
The amendment's in red.
It's let me just check. See, this is why I like doing it in person. I think I just opened the wrong file.
Greg, it's in a reply to the email that the agenda packet is in.
Yeah, I just opened the wrong one when I did it. Okay.
Gotcha.
All right, so I look for the motion then for Mary Ann Rondo, you're saying? I won't try to pronounce it. I'm doing horrible with it.
Dylan, you want to make the motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we appoint Mary Ann Rondeau, an election worker.
I second the motion.
You want to do all three at once?
Sure. I'd like to amend my motion to include Theodore J. Cowell and Matthew J. Krasowska to also be appointed election workers.
And that's Cowell the Third. I'll just note that specifically.
Cowell the Third.
Thank you.
I second that. That made
Motion
the
is-
motion.
Motion is second to appoint these three as election workers. All those in favor?
Matt Urban, aye.
Dylan Clark, yes.
Greg O'Sullivan, yes. Our treasurer collector search update. I don't know if you guys have done any more looking into these or tried any Google searches and things to look them up a little bit. I have. Hasn't changed my prioritizing, as having Alex as my first choice and Lisa would be the second. You guys have different priorities on that or discussion about it? Or?
I would say Alex is my first choice, followed closely by Lisa.
I was still 50-50, so with pretty much 2/3 of the board, I think I would make a motion that we offer the position to Alex.
Haggerty.
Yeah, but I'm trying to, but that's my motion. Okay, Alex Haggerty.
I'll second that motion, please.
I have a motion to second to offer the treasurer position to Alex Haggerty. Little further discussion, I'll start on this. Just want to make note before official jobs offer, especially where this is our finances, that we do a sufficient Cory check and make sure that everything's okay. I would be surprised if it's not, but that should be a condition of employment. If it's not spelled out, we want to make sure we do spell it out for that job.
Yeah, it is included in the employee packet. Somebody can't get officially hired until they pass a Cory check.
Okay, just wanted to make sure to clarify that since it's the finances before we move on. Any further discussion, gentlemen?
Yes, due to the lack of experience being an actual treasurer collector, if I'm correct, he's only been an assistant, and the lack of understanding our software system, I would not entertain a higher than step one introductory, unless, I mean, I would rather go to Lisa because I think they're that close, and I wouldn't want to entertain a hire because I don't think he brings enough to the table to bring that up because he doesn't have quite that level of experience.
My concern for Lisa, of course, was the education, and part of it, the education you get when you take accounting courses and college courses, is how to rectify things and how to find differences. Like, we all learn how to balance our checkbook, and when you take accounting classes, there's actually not tricks, but methods of checking out balances to determine where the errors came from. I don't want to do a lot of discussion on air unless we have to in the future, but I'd encourage you guys to Google the history and could discover some things as to why she's looking for a job now. But until then, we can have, if Alex accepts a job, we can go to executive session and strategize for salary and decide what step to start and what we might be willing to move to. But versus going to Lisa, I've had good referrals for her, character-wise. Don't get me wrong. I've did check into her, people that know her personally, and I heard good things, good character references. I still have a concern for the education side of that. Okay. Any further discussion? All right, we have a motion, a second, to offer the job to Alex Haggerty for a treasurer collector. All those in favor?
At Urban Eye.
Dylan Clark, yes.
And Greg O'Sullivan, yes. So Jesse, we could reach out to Alex and let him know. And I think you're right. We don't have to go to executive discuss, but I think we would start with the step one, obviously, because he is new to the job and new to that title.
Yeah, so in the personnel sheet that kind of details the beginning salary for every position, yes. It is pretty black and white, since he does have a bachelor's degree and he would be coming at the very beginning. There's a specific number that I would recommend.
I don't think we need any strategy beyond that to go ahead and make that offer, and Jess can let him know where that starting point is.
Yep.
In the pay schedule. And then if he gets back to us, we'll just, you guys have a start date in mind if they want to start soon? Do we want to try to bring them in next week if he's willing, or do you want to leave that up to Jessica to line up a start date, assuming he accepts? Rather than wait for us to have another meeting or force us to have another meeting.
I think we're going to have to, two things. I think we need to confirm that he wants to accept it and what rate that ends up being based on how the personnel policy kind of sets that interim step. Well, not initial step, I mean, not interim.
Right.
But then we got to go through the wage authorization. But I'm also curious if we think it's worth, it hadn't been much time. It's only been, 2 weeks, just over, since Sharon left. but I don't know if we would want to couple Alex's starting week with some carryover from the consultant to have a few hours or a couple days where we just share information that was identified and pass it along as we go.
And we need some input from Alex's when he's available. He may have a time limit that he's got to give a notice where he's at too. I believe he's still working, so he may need multiple weeks notice anyway. So we're okay with what we have going on, and we could certainly, I would think, keeping an overlap is smart. It's always smart. We're for at least a couple days to come in, or 1 day to come in, and you got to get everything signed over, raise the books, signatures on the checks. So I guess we'll definitely be holding off then at least till the next meeting. But Jessica can move forward with the offer. And we'll see what he needs for time, and you can get back to us and discuss this, I guess. If we need to, she can reach out by email. We could line up and post for a meeting, but I would assume we can wait till our September meeting. Try to finalize it all then.
I agree with that.
That's why we want to talk about it. Request for use of town property. I've got to go down and, well, it's in the other packet now, right? I got to shift back. Unless somebody has that available. I really don't like doing this remote. Do you guys want to call out the wage authorizations for DPW specifically, or do we? I don't know if we have to because it's a union contract. I don't think we have to approve it separately. We just had, as I would call, talking to Labor Council. I didn't think we had to. We didn't have to point them, but we need to approve those wages, though.
So we didn't do the vote on the last time?
I don't think we did this. We approved it with the contract, but I don't think we officially called them out by name and approved them. I don't think. We could just approve the list as it is here.
That would be my recommendation. Approve the list as submitted.
I'd make a motion that we approve the DPW wage authorizations of the 13 individuals listed here on our agenda packet.
I second that motion.
Motion is second for the wage authorizations for DPW. Any further conversation?
Just wanted to double check. Did we do the math to ensure that this does work out with the revised negotiated wages? I'm just curious, Jess, if you had a chance to take a look and say, okay, that makes sense. That is the appropriate dollar figure for this period.
Yes, I did. And initially I had been coming up with a different number, but then we looped back with Tom George and everything's correct.
Thank you very much.
Hearing no further discussion, we have motion is second. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor to approve these wage authorizations?
Matt Urban, yes.
Dylan Clark, yes.
Greg O'Sullivan, yes. Okay, now the use of property we'll get to. Any idea what page we're going to be on for that?
For town
Yes.
property?
Page 19 of the older agenda, the PDF page 19.
Yeah. All right.
That's actually the second item on the agenda, but it's the first one you come to going through the packet.
Yes.
Next step.
Next step. So we have two. Have you guys read this? I'm just reading the letter now.
I have, and I'm completely comfortable. It actually kind of follows what we were talking about weeks or months ago, where we said if a restaurant or a company wanted to use some town property to help their business maintain activity and keep going, this is consistent with that. They're just looking for some outdoor space. the southern portion of the common here up in Barre, where the farmers market normally sets up.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking to be able to use that to do some of their dance classes outside so they can increase their class size because the building is too small based on occupancy requirements.
If they get a schedule down for that, so we know when they'll be there, so we don't overlap them with someone else.
It shows Monday through Thursday from 3 to 7 p.m. It's kind of like an after-school program type class setup, if I read it right.
That's right. I think it says that the 3 to 7 is, I think she'll make the times more specific later when she learns more information.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion for that use of town property?
I make a motion that we accept the request for the use of town property, and I would recommend that we extend this till, let me rephrase that. I don't want to put this in the motion, I'm saying, but should we set this with a finish date to have them revisit us by to see if it's appropriate for both parties to continue this arrangement? In other words, rather than leaving it open-ended, it's good until the end of November. By November 14th, come back and ask us if you still want to use outdoor activity as we enter winter, et cetera, that type of.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to do a mandatory callback. You know, we can certainly terminate it at any time we want. And they could also just discontinue using. So it doesn't matter to me either way. I don't think it's necessary. I'm not worried about leaving it open-ended for now. We can always reel it in later, but if you feel more comfortable setting a finish date, by all means.
Okay, I'd like to, I'll repeat my motion then. I'd like to make a motion that we allow Next Step Studio of Performing Arts to use the South Common area from Monday through Thursday, 3 to 7 p.m. Until November 14th. And they can request additional time if they so choose prior to that date.
Very good. Do we want to discuss fee or lack thereof for outside space? This is. I don't think it imposes any cost on us.
I'm willing to defer all of our fees down to the minimum non-profit, whether they're profit or not. But it would be a one-time fee, not per event. So I'm not saying every time you go out there Monday through Thursday, you owe us $25 or $50. It's more of a paperwork processing to cover the administrative costs of just filing the request. Not
So one-time $50 fee then?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm looking. Okay, Dylan, you want to second that for me?
Yes, I would love to second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion, a second, to allow Next Step to use the common area they discussed on their daily activities from Monday through Thursday till November 14th with a one-time $50 fee. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none, I'll call, go ahead.
No.
Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Matt Urban, yes.
Dylan Clark, yes.
Greg O'Sullivan, yes. Our next one, we had another use, didn't we?
Yes, the Making Opportunities Count group. I had some questions about it, and Jessica and Sandy did a good job answering that for me in between. I think this is the group that does a lot of the story walks around North Common.
Oh.
What page is that in the agenda?
20.
The very next page.
So I just went right by it, huh?
Yeah, one was just a letter and one was the actual application form.
Gotcha. All right. So is this the one where they have different areas, they tell different stories in different parts of the common, like they set up, like, I don't understand what they're gonna do.
It was described to me like they actually kind of walk around and tell the story to the kids following them, and they kind of use that as just, the walk is part of maintaining a little bit of their attention and keeping the story going. I haven't participated or observed one, but that's my understanding. Is it's literally a couple adults chaperoning some younger kids and kind of tell them some stories. And I think the subject matter may vary, but it's, kid appropriate, obviously. It's just, I'm trying to remember, I think they did a walk. Do they do one around Halloween where they kind of do a scary stories walk? Or I thought for some reason.
I thought they did in Halloween, yes.
Something like that, but the application doesn't really clearly define all the things they do.
Right, and that's the problem. I'm not questioning the application like we're going to question letting them use the property. I'm hoping to give the public more, better idea of what's going on with it, because I think it's a good program. But unfortunately, shamefully, I don't know enough about it to promote it better for them. But I think it's a great idea. I'd like to see them get out there. I'd like to see the kids get out there. So I look for motion for the use of the property for them.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve the request to use town property for the Making Opportunity Count organization.
I second the motion.
Motion to second to let them use the town common for Making Opportunity Count.
Just to clarify, this is a request specific to August 20th from 10 a.m. to noon. This is not an ongoing, recurring.
Yes, 10 to noon. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Matt Urban, yes.
Dylan Clark, yes.
Greg O'Sullivan, yes.
And are we setting the fee for this as well?
If you're okay, I would like to make a motion that while businesses are inhibited due to COVID regulations, that all use of town property be designated as a $50 fee until further notice. We can revisit this when general business reopens without governmental regulations preventing them from using full business opportunities.
I like the spirit of that, but I feel like we should hang on to our ability to judge events on a case-by-case basis.
You saying for business, Matt, or for all cases?
For right now, I think any use of town property would either benefit the town constituency or businesses. And I think at this time, maintaining a flat $50 fee, whether you're nonprofit or profit, would be beneficial to the community in either case, while we're still dealing with COVID regulations that reduce social gatherings, reduce business activities, and inside building occupancy limits.
I tend to agree with you, Matt. Like Dylan said, it's a good idea, but I do agree we should do it across the board. I don't want to forget to do it sometime in one of these and have someone else get stuck paying more. And that wasn't the intent of trying to get people on the common. The intent was to help businesses. And I think reducing the fee to $50 for this time until this COVID, until further notice, until we bring it back up to regular schedule, I would certainly second that motion. So we'll have a vote. All those in favor to lower the fee to $50 until we further discussion on it?
No, and I agree with you. Rather, so we don't get caught in being viewed as subjective with this. That's why I agree with the just standard flat fee, $50 moving forward, so someone can't decide that it's a subjective opinion versus an unbiased opinion across the board.
We'll call for vote, gentlemen. Those in favor?
Yeah, Dylan Clark, yes.
Matt Urban, yes.
Greg O'Sullivan, yes. The fees will be made at $50 for the town property uses until further notice by the board. Doesn't mean we might not waive it to on occasion for groups. There's times we do that, but not in general for this. We have correspondence here from John Salona. I haven't read this all the way through yet. Have you guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Metal detecting on town property. He's trying to make sure he follows the appropriate steps. Reached out to our town administrator's office, and I believe Sandy found a bylaw that did indicate he had to bring it before the Board of Selectmen to request doing so before. He seems to indicate he understands being respectful, filling holes that he finds. He doesn't just go dig holes or leave trash behind if he finds something he doesn't like and just throw it on the ground. I guess my big concern here is if he finds something that's pretty valuable, do we want to just say he can walk away with it, or do we want to say there's a certain level of, yeah, you found it, but you got to let us know what you found, and you can't just take it because now we're giving away free town property. That, unlikely based on the complete renovation of the common and everything, randomly becomes a value to the town. I'm just not sure where that legal line is drawn and whether that's something we should just not be thinking about or not.
I recall when this bylaw came before town meeting, and the intent of this, and it was clear to the public when it was done, the intent of this was so people would not metal detect on our common. That's why the town put this bylaw in place. They didn't want anyone to just randomly dig a hole where they thought they found something. And I'm inclined to agree with that. Most of the grounds, the grass is pretty nice up there. I generally wouldn't want to, if I had a nice lawn, which I do not, I would not want any holes cut in my new lawn and dug up so people can look for things. And the bylaw, and my feeling is the spirit of what the town was after when they agreed to this bylaw was that people would not dig in the common. So I would be against this.
I may have misrepresented this. He did specifically call out the Barre High Plains Common, the small baseball field next to the Barre High Plains Fire Department, old station number 2, I believe, and around the Henry Woods Building Town Hall. So I guess he wasn't speaking of Nornay Park or the upper common areas here. But still, I wouldn't want to say Barre High Plains Common is of any less value than the common up here. I think that would be.
And still, now we talk about the Little League field. That's the Little League's jurisdiction, really. That's Parks and Recs. That's their field. They maintain it for the kids. You certainly don't want to start digging holes with the kids that are fielding or anything else. The fire station, as far as I'm concerned, you can ask the fire chief about the fire station properties. My concern is for the commons, and my answer is no, personally. And I would not give consent for someone, but I would leave it up to Parks and Rec if they want to let someone dig in the baseball fields, or the fire department if they want someone digging around the firehouse. Those grounds I'm not worried about, but I think those people who control those grounds should have that say.
What about the Henry Woods building?
No.
Okay.
I don't want anyone digging up near our town buildings or in our commons. I just don't.
Oh, understood.
But that's my opinion, and that's what I think is a reflection of what the town voted for. That's where it comes from. It's not my personal opinion. It's what I believe the town was after with their votes, to not have our commons and our public buildings just randomly dug up if someone wants to. But baseball fields, Felton Field, if the Parks and Rec is okay with it, that's okay. Go through those commissions, those fields. Generally, other places, you know, certainly not cemeteries, obviously, either, but generally on the side of the road or something that's not around one of our specific structures, or, you know. I think the bylaw really just restricted the commons, but I would rather not say yes to the either.
Okay.
If you check the bylaw, I think it was specific to the commons unless it was all in Barre.
The bylaw is specific to all town-owned property, and so basically the way that somebody goes about getting this permission is they have to get both the approval of the commission, like you said, Parks and Rec over for the baseball field, and also the Board of Selectmen.
If you guys have my opinion, I'll entertain whatever you want, and certainly allow you guys to vote whoever you want on it. I just, you know, I have nothing personally vested in this. That's what I recall from.
I make a motion that we move this request to the Parks and Recs Committee, the Barre Fire Department, the Common Committee that was, if I'm correct, is still together right now for the new Common. And find out if they are okay with this. And then when they have made their votes, they can send the results back to us. And based on their votes, we can then make our decision. Let the committees and the commissions that rule the various different other locations make their decision and then come back to us. And then we have more information to base our decision on.
Yeah, I would second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to pass this back to the individual committees that utilize those lands. Get back to us later. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor?
Matt Urban, aye.
Dylan Clark, yes.
Greg O'Sullivan, yes. Okay, I believe, if I'm following down here, we're looking for the assigning a committee for the street listings. I took some time to talk to Bill about this, and basically the bylaw reads that the street addresses will be designated by a committee. So you may see a lot of times a building lot, you'll say lot 4A or lot 5, you know, it'll be an assessor's map, say 101, section 3, plot 2A, and that's a designation of the land. Then at some stage you get a street address listed, and we just say Worcester Road, you know, 1251 Worcester Road. And the bill's saying that it would be more appropriate to get that street listing first, before any improvements are done. Often you'll find the driveways are cut, trees are cleared, wells are dug, a lot of improvements are done to the property before they even get the street listing number. And then when they need a number, what was happening in the past is former building inspectors would just assign the number, but it's not theirs to assign, given to the town bylaws. The bylaws say that they'll be assigned by a committee. So my suggestion was, and Bill was agreeable with it, that we would assign a committee tonight, which would consist of the town administrator, the assessor, and the building commissioner. And he rightfully argued that the town administrator would know nothing about this. But the appropriate people to assign this typically, he assures me, are the assessor's office with the maps would give it the designation, or the building department. So if the two of them get together and agree, or one of them can highlight it, they just need a second from the town administrator. to go ahead and assign that number. So that would allow the building inspector to actually assign a number with Jessica's approval, or have the assessor assign a number with Jessica's approval. So the bylaw, I didn't read it. We'd have to double check to make sure. But as he explained it to me, the bylaw is very vague. It doesn't spell out who shall be on the committee or who it should be made up of. So if we assign 3 people to the committee, it doesn't have to be people, it can be positions. The committee will hereby consist of the building commissioner, the assessor, and the town administrator. That way it's always full, and we always have a way to assign street numbers legally without someone just doing it on the side, which is what we've been doing apparently for years. And then something to consider, and I would think a policy would cover it, that policy should be that anybody obtains a street listing number, a street address, prior to improving a property. That doesn't mean they can't go cut some trees, but it means they can't cut a driveway, they can't put a well in, they can't trench and bury pipes, or do anything until they have their street address. And the way that affects us is this. Let's say somebody is digging a well, and they have an accident, and they need the fire department. We need the fire department. What's your location? We're Assessor's Map 12, Parcel 3A. That's all they know. And the fire department's not going to talk to the assessor and find out where the heck that is, or hope GPS locator does it. But before they're allowed to dig that well, they get a street address, and you can say, it's Cutoff Road, number 12. It's 12 Cutoff Road, you know where to go. So it makes it easier for the building inspector to find without having to jumble through maps. It makes it easy for contractors to find where they're going places, and it makes it easier for emergency services to find. So I'd like us to make a policy that street listings will be obtained before any improvements are done on property, and then assign the committee of the building commissioner, assessor, and town administrator to be the 3 committee members. Quorum would be 2, so they can agree to set an address. Ask away now.
The assignment of the bylaw specifically says that a number shall be assigned to each structure, not parcel, not lot, not open space. So I believe it was intended to be identified as structures are built. So I do believe the concept of creating a standing committee based on position identification, town administrator, assessor, building commissioner, may be appropriate, because that way, as permits come in, they all have a say in it, and then they choose the number as it comes. Because also the bylaw says that the person that now gets the number has 90 days to put the number on the structure. So if we don't pay attention to that and we just start randomly assigning numbers, it puts our bylaws in a little bit of a mess by putting a responsibility on people that can't properly interpret the code.
The structure could include a post or a mailbox.
But it's unnecessary because structure comes with building permit. Until a building permit is filed to build a structure, there's no reason for zoning enforcement to go and find out if a number has been put on a structure, because we cannot mandate people to build structures on their property. We can just control how they do it. I think we got to be careful there. That's all I'm saying.
I think that a stake can count as it's not really a structure, but I think we'll have to check with council and make sure, but I think the concept here is to identify where something is in town without having to go back to assessor's maps. So when the building inspector's going out, code enforcement's going out, fire inspector's going out, they have a way to easily trace where they're going. And as our bylaws are now, I believe in any given driveway entrance, we're only allowed 2 structures off of a driveway, two homes. You can't have any more than 2 in a shared driveway legally in town without going through special permitting to do it. I still think it's a good idea to form the committee. We can do that at the very least. If we need to look at it further and redefine it, I think we should. If we need to modify a bylaw at special town meeting, we should. I'd like to see the address, because it is a street address and it doesn't have to list the structure. The way ours work in town, you guys might not know, whichever end of a road is closest to the center is where the numbering begins. And every 10 feet down the road designates an address. So for example, my address is 27 School Street. I am 270 feet down from the beginning of this road. So that also helps find when we're going out. We know when address is how far out a road I'm going. If I'm going to 1282, I'm going 1,280 feet out. So I'm going about a quarter mile, a little over, out to this house. So I know how far I'm looking to drive when I'm looking for a residence. So it's not like they just throw out random numbers. They do, go by the distance they are off the end of the road. That's how they're assigned. So it does help lay them out. It can't be redundant. It goes by the driveway entrance anyways. So if somebody wanted to cut a driveway, or I suppose you can improve your land to a point, but I would think it's in everyone's best interest to have at least a stake and a number out if people are going to be working on a property where they could possibly need emergency services at some point. I don't think there's a fee involved for the numbering. I think it's just a request. I have to look at the bylaw again, but I'm not looking to put a fee on someone and say you got to pay us and get a number to start. I just wanted to get the number so we can trace the listing and the activity, so we make sure no one's without emergency services if they need it.
Well, just to clarify, the very first part of that, section 25-1, number to be provided for each building says street number shall be provided for each dwelling, industry, or other building in the town of Barre. So it does not speak to open lots. I think it just comes down to when a person does submit a permit, our building commissioner, Bill Cantel, said that he doesn't have the authority to assign a number, so he's bringing it to our attention. We need to create that committee so they can assign a number
right
when they need to.
Right. It was my thought and suggestion, not his, that we might want to consider, if we can't do it as a policy because it's in the bylaws, getting a bylaw so when somebody wants to improve their land some way, that we get a staked address number on it wherever they cut that access in.
Well, that's something I think that could fall under a certain interpretation. I agree with you there. You're actually doing activity on the land. It's not just a long run of land that has been untouched for forever. If someone's got a 100-acre field and you're running along the side of it, you don't need a stake every 40 feet saying you're now 40 feet further down the road.
Well, let's say, for example, that exact same thing, that a farmer does have a 100-acre field, but they have a barway cut in at a certain point. When we go to a brush fire, now, most of the guys know this town like the back of their hand, so they know where the barways are. But it wouldn't hurt to have a stake and a number to know where the barway is. We got a brush fire going. We're off of Stage Road. The address the barway's at 62, so we know how far out to go. If there's not a fee for it, it would just let them identify openings into their property too. It kind of gives you the mark. If it's not a street address, but and maybe we need to label it differently. We'd have to talk to the assessor about that too, because maybe we can do some listing.
They want to
properties.
Revise that bylaw that also speaks, because under a separate jurisdiction is the DPW's approval of driveway access and road cuts.
Right.
So all of these openings to a road off of property technically are driveways and should require DPW approval.
Barways and farms are different. They have access to their farmland.
They're different just because nobody bothers with them, because they're not a paved driveway to the house, but there's still an access point to the street that in the future could become a traffic hazard if it became the common. You know what I mean? Future build out. we're not there, so it's not an issue to bring up, and I'm not suggesting we should.
And I'm not looking
That
to
would
make
fall under their jurisdiction to call out. You know, in other words, eventually your numbering, like you're saying at the Barway, should line up with a list from DPW saying who's got a driveway access to our road. And if we don't pay attention to that now, it'll become another mess in the future. We're trying to match up barways with random openings and rock walls.
And I don't know if there is already a process set for those barways, if they are laid out, and then I don't want to get into that tonight, but so suffice for tonight, I'd like to form a committee. And I think my recommendation, since it doesn't spell out who must be in the committee, I think putting in those 3 positions into the committee shall consist of the assessor, the administrator, and the building commissioner. That gives us people so we can assign numbers when we need to. As far as redefining how we assign them, we can get to that in the future and delve into it more, but we won't go too deep in that tonight. The goal here was to get the committee assigned. That's what Bill was asking.
I second that motion. That was a motion, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a motion, a second, to assign the street listing committee to be the assessor, the working assessor, the building commissioner, and the town administrator. That motion.
It just dawned on me. Do we want to... Our job descriptions in the assessor's office, I don't know if the working assessor... I'm sure the working assessor can be it. It doesn't matter. It's a representative of the assessor's office.
That's what it's going to be. And
Only-
it'll probably be Bill doing it most of the time, and they can... He's going to work with the assessor, look at the map, or just check with Jessica to get a second on it so they can say they had a quorum. But, you know, I would assume you want a 2/3 quorum, so I picked the administrator because she'll be in the office most of the time. Anyways, that was the intent. And you know, we can modify the committee and change members as we see fit later, but any other discussion, gentlemen? All right, a motion a second to assign those 3 positions to the committee. All those in favor?
Not even yes.
And Greg O'Sullivan, yes.
I would request that we just have a formal document written up so it's not lost in meeting minutes that references the zoning bylaw as to the kind of the charge and the purpose of this committee. So we don't have to rewrite the charge. We're just referencing the bylaw. This committee has been approved by the Board of Selectmen to develop the street listing committee as noted in bylaw 25.4.
And then Jessica, if you could, during the rest of the business this week, just make sure you let Bill know and our assessor know. She may not want to do anything with it, but it fills a position that meets the bylaw, which we've been ignoring it too long. Bill said one of my favorite things. Just because we've been doing it this way, he says, doesn't make it right. I said, I couldn't agree more. I like to do things right. So he had no problem doing the listings as long as he had the right to do them, which he does not, so he was not comfortable doing it for now.
Makes sense, and it's appreciated. It brings it to our attention.
And you can see my thought when I'm trying, we'll work something out better. And I'm glad we had some discussion about it, but the idea of trying to call, if you're going to improve the property, not go cut trees, but if you're going to improve it and do something to it, you know, maybe you're going to do a big outdoor patio or, you know, use it for just outdoor events. You're going to be accessing it. And, you know, we get to that point to where do we need a street cut, a driveway cut, and a number for that cut. So it might mean revising the bylaw to have the number reflect the driveway or the cut off the road as opposed to the dwelling. And then once the dwelling is erected, the number shall be affixed to it. But that's something to think about and kick around. We'll bring it up at DPW next time, perhaps, and talk it over with them as well. Get some more input on it and see what happens. But for now, this is what he was asking for, so thank you. What are we up to? COVID-19 update? Go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. Luckily, I can keep it brief because the town has seen no new cases since we've met last time. I do want to make note that in Massachusetts, though, 41% of the cases in the past 2 weeks have been people in their 20s and 30s, which is kind of a shift from what we've been seeing since the beginning of COVID-19, where it's kind of been in populations that are older, but now we are kind of seeing an uprise in a younger population. I think that's just because of, it's nice out. People are, they want to be socializing.
Possible.
Right.
They were.
Yeah. So just a note to everyone to continue to be vigilant as they go out and enjoy, the businesses that are open. I do want to say that the fire department has earned a FEMA grant. It's about $8,000 for respiratory PPE that covers every member of the fire department, which is a really great grant. Thank you to Chief Rogowski for getting that for the town and keeping our firefighters safe. And as I noted earlier, Chief Carbone is working with the police department on a new traffic pattern because we are expecting about 80% of parents to be dropping off their children at Ruggles Lane Elementary School. Now that we have all of our elementary school students are being welcomed back into the building full time, that also comes with a lot of parent drop offs. So he's been working hard with the schools on making sure that children can get into the school building safely, and there's going to be no kind of crossing of buses and parent vehicles, and trying to make that seamless. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other?
Yes.
What do you have?
I was approached by an individual that said that they may be interested in working with potentially funding sound systems, if that would help us do some outdoor meetings, if we're having difficulty getting outdoor meetings where people might be able to hear from where they sit versus where a board or a commission sits. They'd be interested in maybe working with the company that donated their time and equipment for the town meeting. Maybe they might be interested in working with this individual and coming out with some financial arrangement to assist us with meetings. I said that I would bring it up to the board to see if that's something we're interested in. One of the other things we might be able to do, from my perspective, is if indoor isn't ideal at this time, are we interested in looking in either renting or purchasing a larger outdoor tent that we can have set up in the upper parking lot at Henry Woods building that can stay there during the duration of at least until winter comes, where we could do outdoor meetings underneath that tent and have this sound system set up as needed, so that we don't have to worry about crowding people into a smaller room, and possibly by being close enough we can connect to the Wi-Fi at the Henry Woods building. And I believe all of these would fall into the CARES Act funding application stuff. It seems all appropriate. We wouldn't do this otherwise. But the individual that indicated they may be interested in financially helping out with the sound system also said, though, that if CARES Act money could support that, they would rather the CARES Act money do that, and they're not sure how a private entity could donate or front the money per se until a CARES Act reimbursement came. So I wouldn't want this person to put money forward without properly understanding that they may not be reimbursable, because the CARES Act won't work through a municipality into a private individual unless we had some other contractual arrangement that we could work with them so that we knew we were in the right. We didn't set someone up for putting money out that ultimately, if we had just taken the steps ourselves, they wouldn't have had to front it. So I'm just putting it out there. I don't want to misrepresent the other individual, because it was a very preliminary discussion, but they understood the benefit of people being able to maybe see face to face, but also the limitations of what COVID and people being in a room might be. And I do think the general public would appreciate attending a meeting if they didn't feel like they were confined in a room.
You know, initially I was just going to say hell no, but you know, you can get decent sized outside tents, and we could get something at least the size of the boardroom, if not a little bigger. Maybe have sides on the windier side, so even in the fall we could stay out there and not have the wind cutting through people. And as far as somebody donating, if this is something covered by the CARES Act and we can do it, we could contract with that person to supply the tent. So they would supply the tent and put it up, and they'd be our vendor, and we would reimburse them with the COVID money once it's done. So we couldn't do it as a donation. We could do it if they were a vendor billing the town, would be my thought. I think it's a great idea to look into. You know, we'd decide on the tent size, but I would picture a pretty good size outside tent. Maybe a 20 by 30 foot tent. Might have to be bigger, maybe 20 by 40. Something of good size, because we need to space people out as well. You can't just, you know, even 20 by 40, we could sit up front on our table easy enough, but to put people 6 feet apart, we'd have to kind of look at that and see how realistic it is.
I've seen some set up behind City Hall in Worcester. They're like 60 feet by 30 feet. They do make them pretty big, and they use the 55-gallon drums almost pretty much loaded with concrete to
they need to be anchored. You want them anchored to the asphalt, and they're going to be held down. Bill beyond that. There will be code that dictates how those tents are secured and anchored and held in. But yeah, I think it's a good idea. It would, you know, we're in the evening normally, so there's no hot sun. People can certainly, we live in New England, we can wear jackets if it's cooler at nights, and I think, you know, we usually used to have good participation at our meetings. And people, for lack of anything else to do, might actually look forward to going out to go to a meeting to see what's going on and get out a little bit if they could space. So I think that's something we should probably knock up on the priority list. I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
got it.
Dylan?
Yeah, especially for a special town meeting in the fall, it would be nice to have a covering. So we don't have to risk what happened not too long ago on our last
Little downpour we had?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's certainly a possibility. And, you know, hopefully this does go away before the winter's really here. But yeah, if that will put us back in business for a few months outside, I think it's a good idea. Really good idea. Jessica, anything to say on that?
No, I think it's all a good idea. I know we're just kind of in a unprecedented time right now, and we have to make do with whatever we can. And I think that having, you know, we can find more uses for a tent. Excuse my dog. We can find more uses for a tent in the future, outside of COVID. You know.
No, we can't. This is only for COVID.
Yes, but
No,
for now it is. But in the long run, you know, we'll have the hardware, and it can
I'm
be.
sure it can always go out for different events that we might have to, you know, I never know if a meeting gets large and it goes outside or.
I know the police department, they had a pretty good sized tent at the open house the other weekend. And I don't know if that was their tent or where they got that from, but.
I think they rent it, and I know the fire department did a fundraiser last year, and they borrowed a tent from, I think, Ocam Fire, or one of the other fire departments had when we borrowed. And it worked really well. You set it up, in our case, it got shade for people. It was just in case we had rain, which we didn't, but it would protect us from rain. It would give us ability to get people out of the elements, and we could certainly have sides to close it off. It's still, even when they're closed off, there's plenty of open air going through tents. But, you know, it's a good idea. So we need to determine the eligibility, so that, Jessica, will be for you to do. See if we can do that with COVID money, and if we can, we need to go towards it. You know, it's reimbursable. We could certainly buy it and be reimbursed for it through the COVID money, I would think, after the fact. But if we contract with someone who's willing to buy it up front, and we contract with them, then they submit us an invoice, and we could pay it when we get the COVID money in, or, you know, work that out as well.
Yeah, I'll look into it and I'll reach out to DOR about if that would be an eligible expense.
Thank you. Okay. Meeting minutes, July 29th, August 3rd, August 6th. I have not read them. If you guys have and are happy, I'd be willing to move forward with them. Otherwise, we can table them until next meeting. It's up to you if you guys have read them.
I have read them. And the August 6th meeting minutes, I had already sent a comment back to Jessica and Sandy. It was a very minor typo. I think Sandy's already kind of corrected it for the record, but of course, it hasn't been redistributed because we didn't have a chance to talk, so it would, be in not proper form to send you a revised one based on an individual comment from a selectman. But it was, it mentioned the word mention instead of motion when they referenced one of us making a motion. It was a simple typo. Other than that, all three of them I'm comfortable. I believe they're good meeting minutes and everything was accurate.
Dylan?
Yep, I went through them as well and everything. I missed that typo, but other than that, everything looked copacetic to me.
I would take a motion then, gentlemen.
I'd like to make a motion that we we approve the meeting minutes of July 29th, August 3rd, and August 6th of the year 2020.
I second that motion.
A motion, a second, to approve the meeting minutes from those 3 dates. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor?
Matt Urban, aye.
Dylan Clark, yes.
And Greg O'Sullivan, yes. Moves us to correspondence. Did we have correspondence other than that request for the property? Before I plow through all 38 pages again?
We had a correspondence that actually came through today. I sent it this afternoon. They reached out to Matt initially. It was from the Quabbin. I'll have to find the.
It's Q-Drug?
Yes,
Yep.
Q-Drug. There you go. There's the acronym. And they are interested in putting up lawn signs on public property that kind of detail the warnings of underage, drinking and use of substances. So I sent it out to you and Dylan just as a preliminary correspondence, and I would recommend that we put it formally on the agenda in September for you all to make a decision on whether you would want to have these signs placed on public property.
I may have misrepresented because I'm not familiar with all the organizations. I know the individual that I received the email from is also part of Q-Drug, but reading the email signature line, it says Quabbin Hills Substance Use Alliance Prevention Project Coordinator, so it may be a derivative of the Quabbin Hills Substance Use Alliance. Q-Drug might be part of that, so I don't want to misrepresent. So that would be on me if it was misrepresented, so I apologize.
All right, well, why don't we make sure we get them on the agenda in September and invite them in to present what they're looking for. And maybe they'll have some idea of the image of the sign they want to put out before we approve it. I'd like to know what the message is before we say yes or no.
Yep. Yeah, the images are included in that email, but again, I wouldn't recommend that you guys make a decision until the next meeting.
No, we won't. All right. We're down to selectmen reports, I believe. Gentlemen, anything to report?
I got an email, maybe the two of you did as well, about a fellow who lives on Kendall Street. He says that there's a lot of people driving dangerously fast, and he's on that street, and he's wondering if there are steps that he'd need to address that, if the town has steps that could address that, such as speed bumps, speed limit reduction, or increased police presence. I'd say the speed bump makes a lot of sense, but I would just like to say that I got that email, and I'll pass it along to Jason, and that's my selectman report.
I would recommend that's passed on to the police chief. That sounds like a policing issue at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Kendall Street, the speed limit, I believe, is only 30 through there. It's just thickly settled.
It's all of like
25, I believe.
200 feet, right?
Right.
That's the
Not
short
really.
little street between James and South Street.
Exactly. It was
Okay.
made one way years ago because the school kids would cut back and forth through it. So it became a one-way street then, to limit the traffic. And, you know, I wouldn't want to recommend a speed bump or anything unless you talk to more residents, because the speed bumps, I've known people have done it. They sound like a great idea until the third or fourth day you've driven over it 3 times, running to the store and back in one day, and you're saying, all right, this is stupid. Or when you complain about, you know, the people speeding, and the police come sit out, and then you get busted for speeding on your own road because you cruise in at 40 miles an hour in your own street. So I'd caution anyone to be careful what you ask for, because they won't just look for people speeding through, they look for residents especially speeding through that live there. But we can certainly pass it on to the police chief and make sure he's aware that there's a resident concern. Would be my thought. Matt?
Biggest issue with speed bumps on public roads is they don't last. Plows destroy them, and now they just become nasty bumps that then someone's complaining to DPW to constantly repair. And eventually DPW agrees that we should just remove the speed bump and pave it flat again. So it becomes a short-term learning lesson for everybody on the street that it didn't work. So I would just recommend staying away from that. The best is just, you know, it's hard to say, but there's not a lot you can do about it other than lead by example, spread the word, and it probably wouldn't hurt just to have the police department see if they can show up. If you do speak to the police department, try to give a better time frame of when you believe this is happening. Because if they show up at 2 in the afternoon and never see a car, and they do that for 4 days straight, they're probably not coming back. But if they know when you're having this issue and they show up, they might see it and be able to kind of make that example that causes others to stop doing it. But it's all over town. It's an extremely hard thing to catch. It seems to happen on my road. It happens, I know people complain all the time at 62 coming down into a valley road. That short little hill, it's supposed to be 30. People are still going 45 before they realize that they're running into that intersection at Valley, and people coming across can't see you until the last second.
People come past the fire station at 50 miles an hour. They're off on the wrong side of the road because they can't make the corner in front of the Rogowski house down the corner. And, you know, it's a tough street to cross here. And by the same means, people come down this hill, since it's downhill, they just stomp on it. They're doing 45 by the time they go by my house. And as I said, I'm 270th Street down. So, you know.
That's what you get for getting a newly paved road around Kendall Street.
Yeah, it's.
You get fast cars. So all those people complaining about Williamsville Road, just remember, when we get that paved, your next complaint's speeders.
So
Sorry,
maybe
I just had to put that out there.
we should make sure the police get our list of roads that we're paving. You know, that's just a silly thought. We just approved a whole list of roads. We should make sure the police get that list so they'll be aware of. It's a common thing, you know. They can have a little better presence there and slow people down when we first pave it. And once you're there a little bit, people back off and they figure it out.
Not a bad idea, Greg.
They had that list, they'll know where it's going to happen anyways. Anything else, guys? I do not.
No, I do know that we're still having I don't know if it's operator error on one end or the other, but there are some people that seem to have difficulty knowing how to use their phones with a call-in and whether they're muted or not, and that process. And when someone asks for public comment, you know, how do they raise their hand on a phone? I don't know if that's something that is intuitive. I've not done it. I don't know how to raise a hand on a phone.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how they get your attention as a chairman, Greg, so that if you're asking for public comment, how do you know that someone wants it if they don't have a means to tell you they want to add to public comment. So I'm just bringing it up. I don't have a good answer, but apparently it is something that is kind of a hole in the public participation. So,
Well, I believe you can hit star and digit, I don't know which one, and that will either mute or unmute yourself if the settings allow that. And I believe there's another easy combination for raising a hand. And since we can all see the attendees list as panelists, if someone hit the right number, I think it's like *6 or something like that, there'd be a little blue hand symbol next to it. And since we can all see that, that's not too different than someone raising a hand in a meeting. Perhaps we could make just a simple, maybe a simple graphic that just shows the, you know, like or maybe a simple guide for calling into Zoom meetings. You know, I think it's pretty simple and pretty easy to understand, but if you don't know to hit, you know, 2 buttons, that's the difference between being able to use the system the way it's intended and not being able to. So maybe we can just counter that with just a little bit of
maybe Zoom has
I'm sure there's a
something we
plethora
can
of
just
things.
print out and share. You know what I mean? We don't have to write it ourselves. Zoom's got to have something that says hit these buttons to do this.
Oh yeah, society relies on Zoom now, so I'm pretty sure there's a plethora of examples out there of how to make it more user friendly for people. We just have to present the information and educate our fellow citizens on it.
As you know, my intent is to have our meeting in the boardroom in September anyways. So hopefully that won't be an issue. I think we can find a way to ventilate and distancing stays safe for our meeting. That being said, the first Monday in September will be the 7th is Labor Day. You guys prefer to push us off to the 8th, or do you want to, I don't want to kick it out a week. It interferes with our DPW, so I think maybe we either skip it or we do it on Tuesday, and I would think I'd rather do it Tuesday because we want to do the business with the treasurer.
I'd rather do it Tuesday than wait any longer.
Yeah. All right, so our next meeting will be the 8th, and my intention is to have it in the boardroom. I'll make sure that between now and then, Jessica want to come up with a box fan to put in the window, and I would like to, I think the smartest fan thing is to vent out, so the air is flowing from the board table out the back, out the window. And we'll keep the boardroom door open and open a window on the other side of the building. Make sure we have a constant flow of air exiting and turning over. We will wear our masks, and I think we'll be able to get through it just fine. That'll put us back in the regular camera. And if we want to entertain calling in, we can maybe, I don't know if we can get a phone line in there. We probably can. Let people call into the office and we could entertain call-ins perhaps. Try it. If it doesn't work, we'll discontinue it, but I would give people the option that way to maybe call in and participate, or at least for, you know, for a public comment section.
The other thing is the Town Administrator Search Committee, and I think the Planning Board had found a way to use the Senior Center so that they could kind of meet as a group but still have other people via Zoom participate. Maybe if you talk to them, you may figure out how they did it there and see if it's just as easy or even easier to do it in the Board of Selectmen room, because we have some permanent fixed equipment that might be easier to plug in to do that. Because that would give the general public an easier way to speak to us by speaking through the Zoom meeting, and we're still just kind of speaking through the normal room cameras and microphones.
I would think, Matt, if we had a laptop and hooked it to the large screen, we could portray the Zoom on the large screen in there. And, you know, we're going to be on camera anyways. And if we could, we'd like to have those people on camera. So I don't know if we can get the camera to shine on that. But that would allow us to get the Zoom broadcast out as well when people come in on Zoom. But that's something to toy with. We've got a couple weeks to figure it out. Challenge for Jessica and Sandy to get down there and see what they can do with that. But I would think a laptop and a Zoom, we could broadcast a Zoom webinar, let people come in via Zoom. And of course, now that we're back in the boardroom, if we have individuals that have business, they can come before us in the room in the back of the room for the business and leave by invitation only. you know, get back to some normal business and people can see who we're dealing with and what we do. And yeah, I think the Zoom on that large screen will work just fine. I would hope.
One last thing, we discussed this briefly, DPW Commission. So this is just not for discussion, but to bring up for the next meeting is to talk about trying to get all our boards and committee meetings recorded, and whether it's live or later televised or on YouTube. Historically, we've ended up needing a camera operator to work different remote locations or work 2 meetings at once. We probably should just start working out a job description and actually advertise that as a full-time or a part-time position based on the number of hours we estimate we need. And maybe start a discussion with Rick Degon to find out how many hours of video he can actually process with his resources, and what type of support he might need if we need to expand that.
Is there equipment we need to purchase to do that ourselves though as well, so that we own it and can move that around to these different meetings?
So, exactly. So we'll need to add that to the agenda so we can really start getting into it.
Yep, that's a good idea. Okay. Dylan, anything else you want to bring up, Selectmen report, or should we turn it over to Jessica to do her administrative report, if she has anything else?
Yep, I have nothing further to add tonight.
Yeah, Jessica, anything else you want to throw in there before we depart?
Yeah, so I just want to say that I went to the police department's open house. I believe it was, maybe it was last Saturday, it was Saturday before that. It was really, really nice. It was hot, but Chief Carbone has been working really hard on getting plaques to commemorate former police chiefs, and 3 of them were unveiled there for Chief Thomas, Chief Higgins, and Chief Ryder. And they are gorgeous. I highly recommend you all going to look at those if you can. And then I also just want to remind everybody that the state primary is coming up on September 1st, and Ellen, our town clerk, provided me with a bunch of resources for residents if they have any questions about how, you know, the multiple different ways that they can go about voting the state primary. That's all on the Facebook page and will be on the town's website as well. We will be getting a new drop-off ballot box here pretty soon, where if people don't feel comfortable sending their ballot through the mail, they can physically come drop it off at the town hall. And that's all I have for you today.
And we did approve the early in-person voting, which those times should be posted as well, so people can do that. I will say, I didn't hear, I'm disappointed I didn't hear about the police open house beforehand. I would have attended, so I don't know why that didn't make it to the board.
Okay. I know that Amy had been sending out invitations to everyone, so I guess I didn't think that she would have excluded the board, so I apologize for not extending that invitation out to you all.
Listen, typically I'd go and at least, you know, I want to show support for them. You know, surprised we didn't hear about it. So, but I'm glad they had the day, and I hope they had a good turnout for people. It's a good chance to do something with the public and interact with this. Okay. I have nothing else. If nobody does, I would look for the appropriate motion.
And make a motion to adjourn.
I will second the motion to adjourn.
Motion is second to adjourn. Hearing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Nat Urban, yes.
Dylan Clark, yes.
Greg O'Sullivan, yes. Good night, everyone.
Good night, all. Thank you much.
And I will be up to sign the warrant probably first thing in the morning.